I almost didn't go. I stood outside the wedding venue for a long time, invitation shaking in my hand, listening to music and laughter drift through the doors like nothing in the world was wrong. Inside, my son was getting married. The same son who had emptied my accounts. The same son who had forged my signature. The same son who told the police she agreed to help me. Help. I lost my house. My savings. Everything I'd built after his father died. And then, silence. No calls. No apologies. Just a wedding invitation like a slap wrapped in gold foil. Mom, I hope you'll come. It would mean a lot. I walked in anyway. Rows of smiling faces. White flowers. Soft music. People whispering about how proud they were of him. Then I saw him. Standing at the altar. Tailored suit. Confident posture. Smiling like a man with a clean conscience. My chest tightened. He caught my eye for a split second. The smile faltered, just slightly. Then returned. Bigger. Like he'd already won. As the officiant began to speak, I sat quietly in the back row, hands folded, heart steady in a way that surprised even me. Because I hadn't come to cause a scene. I hadn't come to beg. I hadn't come for closure. I came to witness. To watch him promise honesty, loyalty, and love. While standing on everything he stole from me. And as he opened his mouth to say I do, I realized something chilling and clear. This wasn't the end of what he'd taken. It was the beginning of what he was about to lose. His voice didn't shake. That was the part that hurt the most. I promise to be honest, he said, looking straight ahead. To protect what we build together. To always put you first. Each sentence landed like a memory. Because I'd heard those words before, years ago, when he asked me to co-sign a loan. When he said it was temporary. When he said he'd pay me back the moment his business took off. I watched the bride smile, eyes shining, completely unaware that the ring on her finger glittered with money that used to be mine. No one in that room knew. Not the guests. Not her parents. Not even the officiant reading about integrity and trust. They clapped when he said I do. I didn't. I sat very still, replaying the police report in my head. The detective's careful tone. It's complicated when it's family. The way my son had looked at me afterward, hurt, offended, like I'd betrayed him by noticing. As the couple walked back down the aisle, he glanced at me again. This time, his smile tightened. A warning. I smiled back. Not because I was proud. Not because I forgave him. But because he had no idea what I'd already done. Quietly, legally, months ago. While he was busy planning this perfect day. In weddings, I'd learned, are wonderful places to celebrate new beginnings. Especially when the truth is already on its way. The reception was loud. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter bounced off white walls. Someone tapped a fork against crystal and called for a toast. I stayed near the back, unnoticed. Perfect. Because while my son learned how to pose for photos, I'd learned how to read contracts. How to trace transfers. How to sit across from a lawyer and say, I want everything documented. He thought I'd give up after the police visit went nowhere. Thought my silence meant exhaustion. It meant preparation. I watched him dance, confident, careless, remembering the afternoon he'd asked me to sign one last form. How he'd rushed me. How he'd avoided my eyes. That signature hadn't stuck. Because the bank flagged the pattern. Because a notary remembered my hesitation. Because I'd filed a civil claim the week after he blocked my number. A server passed with a tray. I took a glass of water and waited. Then his phone buzzed. I saw it from across the room, the flicker of confusion, the quick step away from the crowd. He read. Blinked. Read again. The color drained from his face. I didn't move. I didn't smile wider. I didn't wave. I just watched. Because the email he'd just opened wasn't from a guest. It was from his attorney. And it began with the words he never expected to read on his wedding day. Service has been completed. He'd stolen everything. But he'd forgotten one thing. I raised him. And I knew exactly how to be patient. When it mattered most. He tried to hide it. That's what gave him away. He slipped his phone into his pocket and forced a laugh, nodding along to a joke he hadn't heard. His bride tugged his hand, pulling him back to the dance floor. "Come on," she said. "They're calling us." He went, but his steps were off. His smile lagged a second behind his eyes. I watched him spin her once, twice, like muscle memory was doing the work while his mind raced ahead. Because he knew what service completed meant. It meant the papers were real. It meant the clock was running. It meant the version of himself he'd curated, successful, generous, untouchable, had cracks no music could cover. At the head table, his best man leaned in. Whispered something. My son stiffened. I remembered the night he told me, "You'll be fine, Mom. You always are." The way he said it like a compliment, like my resilience excused his theft. Across the room, I caught the bride's eye. She smiled warmly at me, grateful I'd come. I lifted my glass to her. Not in spite. In warning. Because the truth doesn't crash weddings with sirens. It arrives quietly. Like a letter signed and stamped. And waits for the music to stop. And when it does, everyone hears it. The band took a break. That's when the room felt it. My son stepped outside for air, shoulders tight, jaw set. He didn't notice me follow, quiet, practiced. Years of learning when to move without being seen. He was on the phone, voice low and sharp. "What do you mean frozen?" A pause. "No, that can't, this is my wedding." I leaned against the wall and waited. He ended the call and turned, startled to find me there. For a heartbeat, we stared at each other like strangers. "You did this," he said finally. I didn't deny it. "I protected myself," I replied. "The same way you taught me to, by not trusting words." He scoffed, but his hands were shaking. "You couldn't just talk to me?" "I did," I said. "You called it family help." Inside, applause broke out as the MC announced dinner. The sound felt wrong now, too bright for what was cracking underneath. "You're going to ruin everything," he hissed. I met his eyes. "No. I'm going to let the truth arrive on time." A coordinator poked her head out. "Everything okay?" My son forced a smile. "Perfect." But when we walked back in, the smile didn't reach his eyes. Because once the music changes, you can keep dancing. Dinner was served, but my son barely touched his plate. He kept checking his phone. Turning it face down. Turning it back up. Each time, his shoulders rose a little higher, like he was bracing for impact. Whispers began at the head table. A cousin leaned in. The best man frowned. The bride's father excused himself to take a call. I ate slowly, calmly. I'd waited long enough for this moment to arrive exactly as it needed to. Then the MC announced the speeches. My son stood, glass raised, practiced words ready. "I just want to thank my mother," he said, eyes flicking toward me for the briefest second. "For everything she's done." Polite applause followed. I smiled back, soft, unreadable. Because everything was finally being defined by paperwork, not promises. Halfway through his speech, a server tapped his shoulder. Whispered urgently. His face drained. Excuse me," he said, setting the microphone down too quickly. As he walked away, the bride followed, confusion etched across her face. At my table, someone murmured, "Is something wrong?" I sipped my water. "Sometimes," I said gently, "the truth just arrives late to the party." Across the room, I saw him arguing in hushed tones, hands moving, panic leaking through the cracks. And I knew then. This wedding would be remembered. Just not for the reasons he planned. They came back to the table together. Too quickly. Too stiff. The bride's smile was gone now, replaced by the careful expression people wear when they sense a lie but don't yet know its shape. My son sat. Stood again. Sat again. The room buzzed with confusion. Her mother leaned over. Is everything all right? My son opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. Just a banking issue, he said lightly. A mistake. A mistake. The bride looked at him, searching his face like she was seeing it for the first time. What kind of mistake freezes accounts during a reception? Silence fell in a small, dangerous circle. The best man cleared his throat. Man, the lawyer's calling again. That's when my son's voice cracked. Can we not do this here? I finally spoke, soft enough to be kind, loud enough to be heard. He took my savings, I said. Forged my name. I filed months ago. Gasps. A chair scraped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The bride stared at me, then at him. Is that true? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because lies survive noise, but they don't survive questions. And in that moment, surrounded by flowers paid for with stolen money, my son learned something too late. You can steal from a woman who raised you. But you can't outrun the truth. Especially when it's patient. The room didn't explode. That surprised everyone. It went quiet instead, the kind of quiet that rearranges lives. The bride set her glass down slowly. Her hands were steady when she removed the ring and placed it on the table between them. I need air, she said. Not to him. To the room. She walked away. My son didn't follow. He couldn't decide which loss to chase first. People stared. Some left. Others pretended to check their phones. The music never came back. A police officer arrived later, called by the venue manager after the argument spilled into the hallway. Civil matters, they said. Paperwork already filed, they said. This wasn't a misunderstanding. I stood to leave. My son looked at me then, not angry, not smug, just small. You really did it, he whispered. I really waited, I replied. That's the difference. Outside, the night was cool and quiet. I breathed like someone who had set something heavy down. I didn't come to ruin a wedding. I came to reclaim my name. My work. My dignity. He said I do with a smile. And I watched, knowing the truth had already arrived, on time, with receipts.